Save Queenstown's Bank and King O'Malley's Legacy. And Palestine Propels global rise against injustice. Coming up on this week's Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report for the 24th of July 2025. I'm Elisa Barwick. Joining me today is Citizens Party Executive Member and Political Organiser Glen Isherwood. Welcome, Glen.
Thanks, Elisa. Good to be back.
Yeah, because Robbie's in Canberra, you'll be filling in, and you've been there often to Canberra with him, so you'll be able to give us some insights into the process that is afoot, and we've got some big things happening.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of people actually out on the road at the moment in Sydney and Canberra, so yeah, you get me filling in.
You get him. So we're going to talk today firstly about the Bendigo Bank branch massacre. It's just expanding by the moment, and a big campaign we've got to save Queenstown's Bank, which you can help with. That's on the west coast of Tassie. And then we'll come back with an update to what we discussed last week, which is worsening by the day in a really absolutely horrifying fashion, and that is the situation in Gaza. But we'll be noting how this is propelling a very interesting shift, actually. It's really forcing the world, at least in some quarters, to sit up and take notice. So that's good news. Now, please, to help us get the message circulating, press the like button. You can also make a comment below and engage as much as you can, and we try to as much as we can as well, and that helps the algorithm circulate through the back networks of the internet. And do subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Ring the notification bell. And also just to note, we mentioned this in a little bit of detail last week, a membership drive to recruit the ground troops we need for the next election, which we're already campaigning for now, and particularly our key Senate candidates like Robert Barwick, like Professor Andy Schmulo. So we'll put a link below where you can join us, and you can also call us on our toll-free number to help us recruit more members. We actually have so many supporters across this country over 30 plus years of organising. We always have people contacting us that say, oh, I was around you 25 years ago, and they're getting back on board. And so people have heard of us more than what you think, despite us not being in the media.
Well, Lisa, just last week, maybe a bit longer than a week ago, Dr. Andy Schmulo's interview with Unemployable Media was posted, and he's our lead Senate candidate for the state of New South Wales. He's in Canberra with Robbie right now. That's up to 100,000 views, and it's going viral. Definitely check it out, because it's Andy Schmulo, passionate and direct on what the solutions are, and you can see he's frustrated because he knows what can be done and is angry at the inaction. But it's this membership drive, we're putting a lot of focus on New South Wales. We want to get the party registered at a state level, and then around the country, every single state, we would like to put up state candidates and have state campaigns as well as federal in the coming months and years. So if you haven't yet become a member, go to that link today, tell your friends, family and anyone else that is watching this program, now's the time to join.
Yes. And if you're already a member but you still want to help, please look for the donate button below, because we always need support to keep on going. All right, first topic, save Queenstown's Bank and King O'Malley's legacy. And for those who don't know, King O'Malley was the author and founder of Australia's Commonwealth Bank when it was a national bank, a bank to fund the development of the nation, and his concept is really what's at stake here when we're talking about the intervention we're making to save banking facilities, basic services for local communities, and not just, I should say, in regional and remote parts of the country, but in cities as well, where ATMs are closing, bank branches are closing. I mean, we're turning back into the kind of banking desert that Australia was when Europeans first colonised this nation, and you did not have, apart from a couple of big banks that fostered just accounts for the rich, the average people just had to barter or use whatever foreign currency, scraps of which were available, generally on the streets. And you can read about that in a series that I've just written, which we can put a link up to below that history.
Elisa, King O'Malley called himself the Alexander Hamilton of Australia. And for those who've seen the Hamilton, the musical, Alexander Hamilton was a banking genius who created the first national bank of the United States. He was aide-de-camp to George Washington. He became the first Treasury Secretary of the United States and really consolidated the new republic, the 13 colonies, and consolidated and paid down the national debt, the war debt, and did it through a process of promoting manufacturing, promoting national development, and not letting the debt, destroy the new emerging republic, but actually turning it into a useful tool. So King O'Malley was inspired by that. He was American as well. He campaigned around the circles of Abraham Lincoln, around the time of William McKinley, who was assassinated, another one of the people who was following this legacy of Hamilton. He comes to Australia and he says, Australia needs a Hamiltonian national bank. And for 30 years, he works and traverses the entirety of Australia to get a bank that is ours, a people's bank, not a British outpost bank, because all the banks in Australia pre-Federation and up to 1911 were all dominated by the British. And he said, we need our own thing. And it took 30 years to prevail.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this story is that Queenstown which is about to lose its last bank branch, which is a Bendigo Bank branch. Queenstown is where he campaigned to win his first seat. And during that, this was in 1901, and after Federation, the first federal parliament. So he won that seat on the west side of Tasmania. And his very first speech publicising, or one of the big speeches in his parliamentary career publicising the Commonwealth Bank and his plan for it, was made in Queenstown. So it just puts a really historical fine point on what we're defending here. So let us get into some of the nitty-gritty on this, because Bendigo, as people would have heard from our reports in recent weeks, announced a couple of weeks ago that they would close 10 branches nationwide, 6 in Victoria, 2 in Queensland, 2 in Tasmania, including Queenstown, and 5 of those, so half of them, are the last bank in town, in Korumburra, Bannockburn and Yarram, Victoria, Malanda, Queensland, and Queenstown. Now, we've just heard overnight that Bendigo is also closing another 28 what they call agencies, which are agencies for banking in various regional centres. And these are in places where it is also the last bank in town. So those agencies will be shuttered as well.
We're talking banking through the local news agencies or post offices in those towns.
Some kind of agency, yeah, maybe a rural depot or something. Now, Dale Webster from The Regional, who follows this like a hawk, has written an excellent article, and she actually shows how, outside of those ones that have just been announced, the 28, Bendigo, including the 10 just announced, have actually shuttered 100 branches in the last 5 years. And this is kind of a big deal, because when Australian bank branches started closing their doors en masse after the Commonwealth Bank was privatised, Bendigo at a certain point became, that's the alternative. That's your community banking. Everyone said to us when we would raise the need to return to a government bank, oh no, we've got Bendigo. Well,
it actually owes its origins. Its origins in north-east Melbourne, Victoria, Bendigo, hence the name, was a merging of a bunch of co-ops and community-owned banks to represent and be that more community-minded service. And they were that for many years as they emerged. But what we see today, Elisa, is it's corporatised. It is unfortunately adopted all the same policies and agendas and directions that the big four banks have. Now, they call themselves the better big bank, the better alternative, but as you can see, they're closing branches, they're part of the new payments platform, they're advocates of going digital, they're a
member of the ABA, the Australian Banking Association.
Yes. So whatever origins or whatever PR they had or whatever they did in the 1990s, sadly, it has become captured by the same corporate mentality that the big four banks have. And when the word came of the 10 branch closures, of course, naturally people ask, well, who owns the Bendigo Bank, which is Bendigo Adelaide Bank? Well, look at the top shareholders. Who do we have? 6.5% ownership, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street.
Yeah.
You see the same names that appear as the big
bank.
shareholders of all the big private corporate
Yeah.
banks in Australia. They are no different. And that is, it's really disappointing and sad that a bank that was there to fill the space after the Commonwealth Bank privatised in the 90s and was doing a very good thing has been captured this way.
Yes, absolutely. Now for Queenstown, it's a big issue, and the fight is building in an excellent way. So it's not just the last bank for Queenstown, it's the last bank branch on the entire west coast of Tasmania. So this is really shocking that this is being allowed to occur. People of Queenstown are being told that they can go to the Bendigo Bank branch at Burnie, which is just a short 2.5 hour drive, often through icy mountain roads with hazardous black ice and so forth.
Yeah,
and
it's not a flat road down the Hume Highway, but like, we take for granted in other parts of the country. This is
2.5 hours of that would be bad enough.
And that's one way. So you think about getting there and back, that's a whole day trip.
And furthermore, because we've been talking to some of the locals down there, and Bendigo had already reduced its opening hours in Burnie, which is a sure signal, if there ever was one, that branch is slated to close at some point when they start cutting back the hours. And Queenstown local Janet Lay, who we cited in the media release that we put out, which you can see the full details of below, she's questioning the claims, as we always do, of the low branch traffic that is cited as the justification for closing the Queenstown branch. And she's actually shown, just from the figures of deposits made in branch alone, they're on track this year to surpass each of the last 2 years in terms of deposits. So, and people don't only go into banks just for deposits. There's a lot of other bank business people have to go in face-to-face for service. So she's organised a change.org petition with nearly 800 signatures, and all of the locals are incensed about this. The local council had put up a motion which, we'd been talking to them and proposed this, and the motion passed to demand that the government, so they will contact the government, various people in the government, that the government respond to the findings of the regional bank closures inquiry, which was the inquiry that we participated in and got up, and of which the government had, they have 90 days by parliamentary law to respond to those recommendations, which included stopping the branch closures, making banking an essential service, and putting an expert panel together to consider a bank in post offices or some kind of public bank. It's been for over 14 months and the government has not responded. And what we've said in the media release is that this makes, that absence of action makes this branch closure and the impact of that local community their fault. As we put it, by ignoring the Senate report, Albanese and Chalmers are tacitly endorsing the bank's actions. The government must act on the Senate recommendations and make it clear to the banks that they are expected to provide a service. Now, we want to run the clip here, just so you get to be a fly on the wall on these proceedings, of the local council putting up this motion and unanimously passing that motion.
I've also got another motion about notice. In light of the West Coast losing its last bank, the Queenstown Bendigo Bank, Council calls on the Albanese government to respond urgently to a report of the Senate RRAT Committee's inquiry into bank closures in regional Australia, and to communicate this motion to all Tasmanian MPs and Senators. PM Albanese, Treasurer Jim Chalmers and Financial Services Minister Danielle Molyneux. Big word. But can I have a seconder for that motion, please?
Sorry, I didn't catch what the essence of the motion was. To write to them.
Oh, sorry, just write to them just to ask for them to respond urgently to the report that's on their table that the Senate has already asked them to look at, and at the moment they haven't done anything with it.
I don't mind seconding it.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. Any other discussions, councillors?
Yes, Mayor. Was this the report that was targeted at the 4 big banks to not have any closures, and that's Bendigo falls outside of that, not being one of the 4 big banks? Is that correct?
Yes, but it's all around remote rural areas.
Yep.
So there was a lot to do with the big 4 banks, but it also engrossed any bank as such.
Yep.
In rural remote areas. So I've had discussions with a guy from the Citizens Party with regard to this. There's a bit of work going on in the background as well. So he's at the moment in Canberra talking to ministers around this, and it's quite serious. Most of these communities that are losing their Bendigo Bank in this last round are remote areas, and there's a fair bit of an outcry. So that we're just trying to get politicians to do what they were asked to do by the Senate with that inquiry, to look at what was put on the table by the inquiry, but they put it in the drawer as such.
Yeah.
So that's all it's just to write to them to ask them to.
Yeah. If I can use my phone, I can provide a bit more information if that's all right. Just some information that is exactly what the Mayor's talking about. There was a press release by the Citizens Party in Canberra this week to demand that the Albanese government respond to the banking inquiry. They were late doing it, and I'm just waiting for technology. All right, so the Citizens Party leader, Robert Barwick, and Dr. Andy Shumillo will be in Canberra this week to advocate for Queenstown and Tasmania and its 9 other towns where Bendigo Bank's closing its branches. The Bendigo Bank's Queenstown branch is the last bank in town, and it's also the last bank on the entire west coast of Tasmania. So 5 of the 10 branches Bendigo is closing are the last banks in town. In May 2024, there was a Senate Rural and Regional Affairs Transport Committee released a report of inquiry into bank closures in the regional Australia, which observed when banks close their branches in regional areas, the impact on individuals and communities can be devastating and far-reaching, especially when it's the last bank in town. Robert Barwick, representing the Citizens Party, attended all public hearings of that inquiry and testified at the 1st of December 2023 hearing of the Citizens Party solution of a public post office bank to guarantee financial services and cash for all communities and force the big banks to compete on service. So there's a bit of a spill there, but the Senate inquiry was posted back then, and they should have an answer within 3 months, and they still hasn't answered to that.
So there's like we have had recent discussions with members of both Labor and Liberal Party, both state and federal, and the Premier has written to the Bendigo Bank as the leader of the opposition. Also had a phone conference with the Bendigo Bank, and I think this needs a little bit more traction from higher up than just our own state. That's crux of the motion, councillors. Any other discussions on the matter, councillors?
It's absolutely imperative for our small community to have the functionality of a bank that you can walk up to for both security purposes and functionality.
Thank you. Okay, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors.
All right, so there you can see the good people of Queenstown, realising they have to enter the larger political stage if they want to save their services.
Yeah, Elisa, what that strikes me is that is your quintessential regional remote area, very sleepy, very quiet, getting on with life, and suddenly they've been whacked with this, the rug's been pulled out from under them. And as you can see from those councillors, they're not career politicians, they're concerned for their community, and they're saying, okay, we need to kick this upstairs. We need to make this bigger. We need reinforcement here. You are that reinforcement. You getting onto the phone to your MPs, you emailing your MPs, telling them to act on what the Senate recommended over a year ago helps the people of Queenstown and every one of these towns that's losing their last branch. If you don't speak up for them and make this a national issue, well, those people down there on the west coast of Tasmania, they're kind of already quite remote, and it's a very windy road to Burnie, so we don't want them to have to take that journey. We've got to jump in here and make this a national lightning rod. And I just like the fact that these locals are, they're doing what they can to push the issue. And we heard from Robbie Barwick this morning in Canberra that the Tassie West Coast Council there will put a letter to the same committee that put this Senate report out, asking them for extra emphasis on action as well.
Yeah, so that's the regional bank inquiry, which can still make an intervention here. And the response in Canberra to this, Robbie and Professor Andy Schmulo have been getting a very serious response to this, because the MPs that were engaged with that inquiry take it very seriously. They know what it means, and you can see the writing on the wall of the way this is heading. There's just no let up, despite the fact that there's been a moratorium announced by numerous individual banks because they were forced by that inquiry to have a moratorium on bank branch closures. And then before the election in February, Jim Chalmers put out a statement demanding that would be extended until the end of July 2027. And that applied to the banks that had already put a moratorium in place, plus he added to the list NAB, which had implicitly agreed to that, and ANZ Suncorp. However, Bendigo was not named in that statement, and that's just ridiculous, to be honest, which you can now see. So this has to be brought to their attention. And our intention in Canberra this week is two things. One, to build the pressure to help Queenstown by getting MPs and anyone that is game to do it to write to Bendigo to demand that they join this moratorium. And secondly, as you just pointed to, forcing the government to respond to that inquiry and to the recommendations of that inquiry.
And just to reiterate what those two first recommendations of the Senate report was from May last year. Number one, treat banking as an essential service, which includes access to cash, which means put obligations on the banks that they must meet these services in the community by law. That was recommendation one. Recommendation two was that the government assemble a panel of experts to look at feasible public bank options, whether in Australia Post or outside standalone, a public bank, whatever the most viable option is, and come up with a concrete proposal. Those were the two first recommendations. And actually, as we said at the time, this was the first time in probably my lifetime, in the last 30, 40 years, that a serious unanimous call came from the Senate of Australia calling for a public bank to be put back on the agenda. The first time in my lifetime. So you can see this was a significant breakthrough.
Yeah.
And here we are 14 months later, we're still waiting for Albanese. And as viewers of this show know, Albanese said less than 2 years ago that if it was up to him and if he could click his fingers, he would not have sold the Commonwealth Bank. He agrees a public bank is good for competition, keeping them honest and driving better social outcomes. He said it all. So it's there on a platter for him to take right now. But obviously there's vested interests afoot that are holding court.
But nevertheless, big breakthroughs given the neoliberal suffocation that this nation is victim to.
Yep.
Now, let's just quickly play here. We've got a short video that Robbie and Andy recorded while they were in Canberra to give you an update in their own words.
Hi everyone, I'm here in Parliament House with Dr. Andy Schmuller. Hello Andy.
Hi everybody.
We've come up this week, first sitting of the new Parliament, to try and hold the Albanese government accountable for bank branch closures, given that there's a Senate report from 14 months ago that has the solution and the government has ignored it. And one of the towns that's about to lose its bank is Queenstown in Tasmania. And it's not just the last bank in Queenstown, it's the last bank for the entire west coast of Tasmania. And these branch closures are Anthony Albanese's and Jim Chalmers' responsibility because they're ignoring this report. The Citizens Party made an important contribution to that inquiry, as did Andy when the inquiry was running. Andy's recommendations were included in the final report. Andy, what are we trying to get these members of Parliament to actually understand?
So we have a report issued by a Senate committee 14 months ago. The government is under a legal obligation to respond to that report within 90 days. 14 months have passed and there's been no response. And what we've seen from Bendigo Bank, the so-called big little bank, the bank that touts its credentials as having its roots in being a community bank, is that these greedy bastards who are making record profits, remember our banks are the most profitable banks in the world now, these greedy bastards who bang on about being a community-orientated bank and bang on about how their roots are in community banking, and even though they have a lease agreement for their branch that goes until June of next year, they've decided to shut this branch without adequate consultations, and in the process they will plunge the whole of the west coast of Tasmania into an economic wipeout. And I think it's time we held chief executives accountable. I think it's time we held the chief executive of Bendigo Bank personally accountable. I think it's time we held every member of the board of directors of Bendigo Bank personally accountable. Bendigo Bank received taxpayer-funded support during the global financial crisis. Bendigo Bank receives taxpayer-funded support on a daily basis because it is understood that the taxpayers underwrite Bendigo Bank's liabilities. The Reserve Bank has estimated that the support that Australian banks receive from the taxpayer is worth $3.7 billion a year. Since the last time we had an inquiry 20 years ago, our banks have saved $74 billion. If Bendigo Bank were to save on its own, were to save $74 billion, which granted this is across the industry, but if Bendigo Bank on its own was to save $74 billion, if they ran a loss of $1 million a year for that branch in Queenstown, they'd be able to keep that branch open for 74,000 years. And the fact that these banks are yet again closing branches, despite the fact that they announced a moratorium on doing so, is demonstrable of the fact that we've got to start holding chief executives personally accountable.
Now, Andy, that's the message that we are delivering to these members of Parliament. Now, without being too judgmental about them per se, but it's safe to say that they're not quite on the same page as us, right? They're a bit soft.
They're a little bit soft because they are bought off, because they are suborned, because they are bribed, because they are bullied by the Australian Bankers Association, the ABA, currently led by Anna Bligh, soon to be led by Simon Birmingham. Simon Birmingham, when he takes over at the ABA, will be the chief lobbyist for the banking industry in this country, an industry which has persistently and consistently undermined Australian democracy.
Well, what we've been able to do for Queenstown is talk to a number of the members of Parliament, including Senator Matt Canavan, who chaired the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Committee inquiry into bank closures, about advocating for that bank to add to the political pressure to get them to reverse this decision. So hopefully we can pull off something this week that does contribute to saving the last bank on the west coast of Tasmania. If we do, though, and this is not to boast, this is just a statement of fact, if we do, this will be the Citizens Party's work, because these are the senators who represent these constituents. We don't. We haven't won the election. They have. These are their constituents. We're bringing the case to them when they should be already all over it. Now, they're responding, fairly well, but they should be proactive in this. And it's only when we can make them proactive will we be able to stop the banks, committing such appalling misdeeds against these towns. So, anyway, it's been
I'd like to add something that you, the viewers, can do. I won't mention which Member of Parliament we were meeting with this morning, but his Chief Policy Advisor said to us, yes, we've been getting a lot of emails about that. We want to do something because we're getting a lot of emails about that. Emails to your Member of Parliament, emails to your state senators, move the dial. I want to urge you, if you want to help us, if you want to help your fellow Australians in Queenstown, if you want to help yourselves, if you want to make sure that the banks are held to account, find out who your Member of Parliament is, your federal Member of Parliament, find out who your state senators are, and write them as many emails as you can demanding that they do something about the federal Senate inquiry into bank branch closures. Demand that they do something about the branch closure in Queenstown.
We're going to use Queenstown as the example to draw a line in the sand here. We've had the inquiry, it addressed the problem, it came up with good recommendations. The only problem is the government ignoring the outcome, right? And so this has to be a line in the sand, and if we can save this bank branch, well and good. If we can't, it adds to the case for the ultimate solution, bring back a public bank in post offices that can serve all these communities. So anyway, we'll sign off here from Canberra today, and you'll be watching this on the Citizens Report and on Dr. Andy Schmulow's YouTube page and other areas. So make comments below, give us any feedback that you can. Share this widely, please, because these are the issues that we have to prosecute to keep making the case that the power of these corporations over our political system must be broken. And the Citizens Party is the party that's leading that fight.
Yep, and get behind your fellow Australians in Queenstown. And when you write those emails, mention that the CEO of Bendigo Bank is Richard Fennell, Fennell, Richard Fennell, and that Richard Fennell must be held personally accountable.
Excellent. And I must say, Andy, I'm pretty impressed with your research on the run there.
My pleasure.
Okay.
I'm paid for.
Signing off from Canberra for this week.
All right, so now since that video was recorded, we have had further feedback, and as I said, a number of MPs are taking this very seriously. With the news of the 28 agencies being shut down, this was brought to our attention by MPs who were very fired up about that happening in their regions, parts of Queensland, etc. But there are some senators, including some from Tasmania, who are still missing in action. And one who we're going to call out because it's just not good enough, and that's Senator Jackie Lambie, who responded to our letter, and it was co-signed by people from down in Queenstown, from locals, and we drew attention to what the council is doing and what they're pushing for to save their bank. And I want to read out Jackie Lambie's response. And if you're in Tasmania, get onto her. She cannot be allowed to just get away with this, taking this position. She said, this is signed by her staffer, so it's in the third person. Sadly, Jackie is unable to intervene in the commercial decision making by the Bendigo and Adelaide Bank Limited. Jackie appreciates the points you have raised that will impact your community's ongoing banking requirements. She also acknowledges the attached document provided by the Bendigo Bank illustrating the viability of the Queenstown branch. Banks, as private entities, generally have the autonomy to make decisions about branch closures based on their own business strategies and financial considerations. Politicians at both the state and federal level cannot directly order a bank to keep a branch open. Jackie offers her sincere apologies for not having the ability to salvage the Bendigo Bank in Queenstown. She encourages you to actively seek the support of the services offered by the Bendigo Bank in the attached document, drive you 2.5 hours up the icy roads, and to embrace the changing mode of conducting transactions, i.e. the digital revolution.
That last twist of the knife in that statement, that's infuriating, Elisa.
Absolutely.
Embrace the change, there's nothing you can do about it, just suck it up, you know. It's a fait accompli.
Yeah, we can't do anything. I mean, what would King O'Malley have said if
Well,
she was talking to him across the ages saying, oh, we can't tell a bank what to do? Well, he'd beg to differ.
And I would just say this, if Jackie was living in the town of Queenstown and this was her last bank in town, and they were saying, sorry, there's no option, you can't do anything about it, would she just sit back, or would you see Jackie in her usual fiery display? I mean, she can ramp up on many issues. I mean, she's missing in action on this one. Why is that? And yeah, I think the people of Tasmania need to be lighting up that phone and saying, this is not good enough. There is plenty that can be done to change this bank decision, this corporate banker's decision. And we've actually shown how that's happened before. I mean, the case of June, which features in this as well. I mean, a reversal of a decision to close a bank branch did occur during this inquiry into bank closures, happened in many places, but one very clear case was the people of Junee, led by their general manager and by their councillors, led a resistance and big protest and got the whole nation looking. And the Commonwealth Bank said, we've changed our mind, we're keeping it open. Not only are we keeping it open, we're going to add 2 extra days a week opening hours, and they're now in talks with the council about adding even more hours of opening operation in a town where it was not viable to keep the bank going. Suddenly they're totally viable. So can you believe them?
And they're happy to keep operating apparently and increase their hours. I mean, and that's a classic example, because the bank was, as you said, scheduled to shut. They gave the date, it was all done and dusted, and the thing that the Junee guys could do initially, because they were told to go to Bank at Post, it was Commonwealth Bank, last bank in town, so they had to go to Bank at Post. That was the only alternative.
The agency and the post offices.
But the post office didn't have a ramp. And for older people or disabled people, you know, they pressed that, Junee Council and the locals pressed that issue, and they said the Commonwealth Bank eventually agreed until the post office could build a ramp. They wouldn't close.
Yeah,
and
basically the Commonwealth Bank discriminates against disabled people by closing its branch, and that really caused them...
That just bought them enough time until the regional and banking inquiry took off during that hiatus point, and then there was a moratorium enforced through that process that, you know, they had to then keep the branch open. So, but that community, and you might remember some of the reporting at the time, I mean, we can put up one of the images of all the people gathered outside the bank, for instance. That community really fired up and came together, the local businesses, you know, showing to the nation, there was some good media coverage as well, what the impact would be of, and we saw it throughout the 13 hearings of that inquiry process, where people just were able to show in living colour how regional and rural towns just close down once the last bank goes, and all the big businesses tend to move to the next biggest regional centre.
Yeah, well, just to re-emphasise it, don't tolerate or accept these mealy excuses from Jackie Lambie or this justification for business decisions. We know that the banks lie and they fudge their data, and their data is not accurate when it comes to branch visits. We've seen this has all come out in the last years. So the same, I'm sure you'll find in the town of Queenstown, and we need to push back very hard. So don't let Jackie get away with this. Get on the phone to her office, get the emails flowing, and everyone around the country.
So look below, you'll see that if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the link in the information box below. Otherwise, go to Parliament House to search the details for your federal and state MPs. Okay, now, second topic, Palestine Propels, global rise against injustice. So as I mentioned earlier, by the day, this is getting to a really shocking point, and particularly with deaths of starvation now on the Gaza Strip because of the blockage enforced by Israel of preventing aid from getting through and only making aid available in 4 locations, and this is supposedly about preventing Hamas stealing that aid, making money from selling it, etc., etc. So in the name of, taking down their enemy, Israel is culpable now for these starvation deaths. There were 15 recorded in one day yesterday. That was reported by the authorities. And the Palestinian government office on the 20th of July put out a statement saying we are now on the verge of a phase of mass death because of the build up to that point. It takes a certain amount of time for people to get to the point of starvation. But you're now having people presenting to hospital, with teenagers that weigh 10 kilos. And this is just not acceptable. You've had crossing closures for 140 days now. There's several crossings, at least 7 I think it is, into Palestine where food and medicine could be brought across, and it's not getting through. 100 aid organisations have now warned of mass starvation being afoot. There are reports now of aid workers fainting, collapsing on the job because they're trying not to, eat too much to allow the supplies for others. Now, we wanted to go through a bit of a roundup because there is a shift occurring, and you would hope so, given this backdrop, where new voices and very prominent authoritative voices are saying, look, I wasn't willing to call it genocide up until now. That's a very serious thing, but it is. And one of those voices is Omar Bartov, and he's a Holocaust scholar from Brown University on Rhode Island in the USA. And he had a very prominent article, which is a big deal actually that this was in the New York Times because it counts as an editorial comment really from that newspaper. And he said, look, I saw evidence of maybe quote unquote war crimes after the October 7 retaliations of Israel began. But by May 2024, he said, I could no longer deny the pattern of genocidal intent. And he said at that point, my inescapable conclusion was that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. Having grown up in a Zionist home, lived the first half of my life in Israel, served in the IDF as a soldier and officer, and spent most of my career researching and writing on war crimes and the Holocaust, this was a painful conclusion to reach and one that I resisted as long as I could. But I have been teaching classes on genocide for a quarter of a century. I can recognise one when I see one. So this was a very shocking admission coming from, given who he is. And I think you wanted to add something to that, what he had to say.
Elisa, this man, Dr. Omar Bartov, is not the only one, but it is significant that someone who, with that history you just cited, who has been a scholar researching genocide and the Holocaust for most of his life, is now saying this. It's who it's coming from, which is more the significant thing here. Because look, there's lots of denial of this. Of course, the major media, will not give this the time of day. Won't give Dr. Omar the time of day either. But in his article, there's a few other names that he cites, and he actually lists off 10 others, many of them who are Jewish, who are condemning the genocide currently being perpetrated by Israel. I'll just list a few of these names and positions that he cites in his article. Shmuel Lederman, an Israeli genocide scholar, has condemned it. Canadian international lawyer William Shabbos. There's Melanie O'Brien, the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. British specialist Martin Shaw. Australian scholar A. Dirk Moses from the City University of New York. Ug Ungur, a professor at the Amsterdam-based NIOD Institute of War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. Raz Siegel from Stockton University in New Jersey. Amos Goldberg and Daniel Blattman as well. So there's a list of 10 notable scholars in the field of Holocaust studies, the World War II Holocaust and genocide, all have said it is undeniable and observable Israel is committing genocide right now. So you don't have to believe us, you don't have to call this an opinion. These people have studied it for a lifetime, and some of these people will have levelled against them that they're anti-Semitic, that the suggestion that Israel is perpetrating genocide in Palestine against Palestinians is an anti-Semitic claim. And this, Dr. Omer says, quote, discrediting genocide scholars who call out Israel's genocide in Gaza as anti-Semitic threatens to erode the foundation of genocide studies, the ongoing need to define, prevent, punish and reconstruct the history of genocide. He goes on to say, it provides an opening for a politics of denialism and impunity as well. Denying Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza, by denying those genocidal actions in Gaza, they threaten to undermine everything that Holocaust scholarship and commemoration have stood for in the past several decades. He goes on to say, what I fear is that in the aftermath of the Gaza genocide, it will no longer be possible to continue teaching and researching the Holocaust in the same manner we did before, because the Holocaust has been so relentlessly invoked by the State of Israel and its defenders as a cover-up for the crimes of the IDF. The study and remembrance of the Holocaust could lose its claim to be concerned with universal justice and retreat into the same ethnic ghetto in which it began its life at the end of World War II.
Well, look, as you said, there's many voices. I wanted to add one on that theme, which was, and there's been a number of Palestinian Christians being targeted. You had the church that was struck by fragments of a shell, which was the one Catholic church on the Gaza Strip, I believe, that Pope Francis, before he died, was in regular contact with. And so that's caused a bit of an uprising, and you had the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem and the Greek Orthodox Patriarch who met in Gaza to discuss that and to try to bring the truth to the fore. Pope Leo has reiterated his call for a ceasefire, but the one I wanted to mention in particular is the judge of the Vatican Supreme Court, Cardinal Augusto Paolo Lo Giudice, and he said, look, now in Israel, given that you have extreme right-wing fundamentalists now in command, and this is something we've pointed to in some of our historical material, which you can find on our YouTube channel, he said, because of the choices they are making, they are now committing the same atrocities that were committed against them, meaning historically committed against the Jewish people. So it has reached that point. Now, I wanted to bring this to what Australia's doing about it, which has been a topic of debate in Parliament already this week, because Australia signed on a couple of days ago to a statement with 27 other countries which demanded, you know, the war end, demanded proper aid be delivered. It made all the right demands, and it said, look, you know, we are prepared to take further action if this is not done, but it specified no concrete action. And Australia's been notorious for, you know, saying the right words, but not actually doing anything like sanctioning the country. And
concretely stopping arms exports or other aid or support to Israel
that's
been used in this war.
Exactly. So I wanted to contrast that statement of 28 countries that Australia is a part of with a conference that took place on the 15th to 16th of July in Bogota, Colombia. And this conference was held by the Hague Group Emergency Conference of States. 30 nations were there. Mostly global south nations, global majority as it's now known, and 12 of those nations agreed, signed onto a statement to immediately do something real, to stop arms shipments, fuel shipments, to block docking or servicing of Israeli vessels or vessels that are taking aid or assistance to Israel, reviewing all contracts for assistance to Israel. These countries include Bolivia, Cuba, Colombia, Indonesia, Iraq, Libya, Malaysia, Namibia, Nicaragua, Oman, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and South Africa. This is the kind of thing Australia should have been signing onto, and that other major Western nations should be signing onto. Now, Francesca Albanese, who's the Human Rights Rapporteur for Gaza, and we talked about her last week. If you didn't watch that show, have a look, because she made a very important intervention with the report that identifies that governments not only need to take the action that I just specified, but they also need to intervene to stop private companies providing assistance to Israel, without which Israel couldn't be doing what it's doing and continuing the war, and which are profiteering, those private companies, from that enterprise. And she stated after this conference, because she was there, and I want to quote what she said there in a moment, but she said what I just said about the lack of action from Australia and others. She said, look, only sanctions can stop Israel. Anything less will be just performance. And that's what you're seeing from Australia and other nations right now. Now, in the actual speech that she made to that Hague Group event, she took what she's been saying to a much broader statement of basically looking at the world and saying, we need to change the way we're acting here. Nations need to come together to create a new order rooted in justice. And she even talked about ending neoliberalism, which is an economic doctrine that is crushing nations and actually forcing us into the situation of war as our economies collapse and as the prevailing nations scramble for control. So I wanted to quote a section of what she said here to lay out in her words that concept. She said, and as I said earlier at the introduction of the show, she does show a positive coming out of all of the suffering in Gaza. And you have to look at it that way. You have to look at how this can be transformative to the world, or else you would lose hope. She said, Palestine's immense suffering has cracked upon the possibility of transformation. Even if this is not fully reflected into political agendas yet, a revolutionary shift is underway. And she went on to say, we are seeing the rise of a new multilateralism, principled, courageous, increasingly led by the global majority. To them I say, the Hague Group has the potential to signal not just a coalition, but a new moral centre in world politics. Please stand with them. Millions are watching, hoping for leadership that can birth a new global order rooted in justice, humanity and collective liberation. This is not just about Palestine. This is about all of us. Principled states must rise to this moment. I say, whatever happens, Palestine will have written this tumultuous chapter, not as a footnote in the chronicles of would-be conquerors, but as the newest verse in a centuries-long saga of peoples who have risen against injustice, colonialism, and today more than ever, neoliberal tyranny. So that's an extraordinary statement for a high-level UN representative to be making, and which completely coheres with what the Australian Citizens Party stands for, not just in our mission to change Australia, but in our mission to change the world.
And the philosophy that out of there is not a great evil from which a great good can arise.
A greater good, yeah.
A greater good can arise. And I mean, for someone like Francesca Albanese to be saying this, I mean, when she's witness to all of this as like sort of the direct reporter on all of this, I mean, it does point to a sense of, stubborn human optimism in the light of great evil. What we're seeing here, it's not about Jews versus Muslims or really about Israelis versus Palestinians. It's really it's a question of imperialism.
Versus humanity.
Colonialism, imperialism, because the whole construct, the whole defined borders of the Middle East were predetermined by Sykes-Picot, the Balfour Declaration. This whole region has been a hotbed of manipulation, tribal manipulation, cultural profiling to get them to kill each other.
Yeah.
And who's the best at divide and conquer in the world? The British Empire. They're the ones who went in there to do this because they don't want these countries to work for peace. They don't want resolution or peaceful outcomes here. They want perpetual war. And Netanyahu's their tool, their asset for that, and these radical fundamentalists in the Israeli government like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are part of this settler movement, these radical fundamentalists, they want a complete wipeout of that, the Palestinian people from these areas to take it over.
Yeah.
So it's all a construct that starts
Yeah.
with the British imperialism.
And if you haven't seen it, definitely watch the interview that Robert Barwick did with Michelle Steinberg on that subject. We'll put the link below because that is definitely the bigger picture that needs to be addressed, without which you can just have a ceasefire and you'll still have manipulations arise as time goes on. But here in Australia, we need to bring Australia to heel on this, as Albanese said, Francesca, that is. Please stand with those global majority nations. Now, our fight to abolish AUKUS is a key factor in that, so keep up the heat on that. We do have the petition circulating and our mobilisation. The Labor networks, the Labor Against War networks are continuing to push on that, and just a little update, because they do have various branches putting up motions to demand the Labor Party stop their support for AUKUS, and they noted that another motion just passed unanimously in Enmore, which is another one in the seat of Albanese's electorate. That is Anthony Albanese. Too many Albaneses in this show.
What does it say about Australia that we talk about the rules-based order and the democratic process that we champion, yet the people of Australia have never really been given an opportunity to have their say on $368 billion of spending on US military hardware, of which, Elisa, at the end of June, we just sent another $800 million to the states to pay for AUKUS. They want $3 billion by the end of this year. And that's our commitment for a completely unnecessary future conflict, which we're being told pick a side.
And it's essentially that money is just a bailout of the arms industries in the UK and the US. Both of them have admitted it. We might not be able to deliver, but you need to help us.
Help us ramp up our production and our manufacturing for this war material.
Even though you may see nothing from it, and we're just happy to go along with that apparently.
Well, that's the significance. The Labor grassroots branches are in revolt against what Albanese is currently doing, what that Richard Marles is doing at the moment. We need to keep that pressure up, and we need to get that inquiry. But absolutely, the best outcome here is scrap the deal altogether.
Yeah.
We don't need it. It's not in our interest. It's in the US interest.
Yeah, and it might all blow up soon too, because apparently upcoming is the Victorian ALP conference, at which they're preparing a motion to hit AUKUS hard as well. So, keep the pressure on these guys. Other networks are doing it too. And apart from that, don't forget to make your calls to your MP to save Queenstown's bank branch and national banking, a revival of national banking for Australia, and banking full stop. We need to keep banking services and revive them and have a transformation.
Absolutely.
Another element to defeating that neoliberal agenda that Francesca talked about. All right, that's the show for this week. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Elisa.
Join us next week.
Authorised by Robert Barwick, Citizens Party, Melbourne.